We are now live. Welcome to the bi-weekly Backdrop outreach meeting. And we are, this meeting is now being recorded and is being live streamed on YouTube. And, ooh, I hit the pause button quick enough to not get the playback in the live stream. Anyway, so if you don't want to be recorded or be live, do please keep your microphone muted and or your camera off. But we do welcome that everyone participate and join in the meeting. These are open public meetings, and please participate if you choose to. We start out every meeting with quick introductions from folks, and we'll each introduce ourselves and then call on somebody else to go next. I'm just gonna, just your name, where you're from, and either something you're interested in talking about today or even just something going on. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm here in Deerwood, Minnesota, and I frequently give the wildlife report outside my window, which this week has been exciting because the fox has been coming to feed on the squirrels that are feeding on the bird food, and it gets very dramatic outside the window, but there's nothing right now, so it's very boring right now. Jen, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Jen Langton, joining from Oakland, California. I'm having a terrible headache this morning, so apologize if I appear grumpy. I'm not actually grumpy. I'm just mad at my head. Let's have Robert go next.
I'm Robert Lang from Altadena, California. And I guess like Tim, I have wildlife outside my window. Sometimes distracts me.
And then you call on the next person.
Jack.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jack Aponte. I use they, them pronouns here in Oakland, and just dropping in finally to start catching up on what's going on in outreach. So happy to be here. And I will pass it to Greg.
Hello, my name is Greg. I'm joining from Greece, usually in Australia. I had a short hiatus of like a week or so, so I'm trying to catch up with comments in Zulip and then hoping to get to the issue queue soon in my pull requests. Tim, did you go?
I did, but I think I'm the last one. So we will, oh, Luke is here. Luke, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Unless I jump in.
Yep. Well, you were here, then you disappeared.
Yeah, you know, I'm here, I'm gone, I'm here. I'm Luke McCormick. I am in San Ramon, California, and I'm late, so I won't do any more introduction now. Let's just get the meeting started.
Great. So we are going to, things relevant right now is the first thing that's on our meeting template. And is there anything that goes into that slot right now? I need to, let's just go on to the things to do and talk about one of the things I'd like to do each week is, or do more of that we've done in the past is ideas for social media posts. So we've actually had a few things. I think our Twitter feed has been relatively active the last week. And we actually did get out one or two things on Facebook related to the virtual user group we had on Tuesday. But are there other things coming up that people can think of? We're Backdrop Live stuff is clearly the obvious choice, although we do have to get that.
Florida Drupal Camp is happening this week. I don't know if there's any sessions there about Backdrop, but we might look and see. And then Mid-Camp also just opened up session submissions for late March, I think. So that would be right after our event, and that might be a good follow on for after people are like excited from Backdrop Live, we could send them somewhere else to go spread the word.
Yeah, well, Mid-Camp, I believe, is going with a kind of an all-unconference-y format this year, which would mean that we have the opportunity to possibly get some content in there without a selection committee. The Florida camp, Jen and I both submitted sessions on Backdrop, and neither were accepted. Although I will say they, from my looking, they had like 60 submissions for like 30 spots. So I'm not surprised that they had to be fairly selective. But so I don't think there's anything on the Florida Drupal camp schedule. However, they have been really friendly to us in the past. And I was looking to see if they had any kind of off schedule. Today is their training day. Tomorrow are their sessions, and then they have a sprint day on Saturday. And we could try to figure out if we could do some sort of BOF. I did a BOF at Drupal Florida camp a couple of years ago. And anyways, so those are good suggestions. We have a virtual user group coming up, another one. We're going to talk about command line tools. That'll be a week and a half, a week from next Tuesday. Is there other, well, anything more? We've got this article. Do we want to do any more tweeting or promoting of that article via Facebook? I know Gregory is potentially working on a blog post. Is that right or not? Are you
I'm
committed?
not, but I wanna, but
Okay.
I haven't started yet. So it was more just to clarify things that were mentioned in that article. But it's my understanding. Sorry, I don't use social media, so I think that people that do from the community jumped, like Jen, and then Mike came and responded as well. That there's some sort of comms. I don't know, Jen, you wanna clarify?
So I tweeted, I didn't know the author, but I do now, which is nice. So I tweeted at Callum Luna and was like, hey, contact me if you want to figure this out. And the author sort of said, that's not what I meant, even though it reads a little bit differently than I think the intent. And so I pointed that out, but I also didn't like, the most of the article is really good, and I didn't want to spend too much time like hammering on like the 1 or 2 sentences that I was upset by. And I was a little bit worried when Mike came in and we're all like criticizing these few things. I'm like, can we just also tell her like, thank you for writing this amazing article? Because it is true that there are like a lot of misconceptions in the Drupal community, and the way it's written sort of falls right into those. But I also, you know, thought for the most part, the article was really positive. I added it to the external mentions section of the backdrop site so that people will find it there. And I think that I think we should, I mean, I don't know if we need to like retweet it more than once. Like, I'm not sure we should make a huge deal out of it, but it would be good to promote it in the same way that we do other articles about backdrop.
Jack, thanks for posting that link to that article. Does when we put something on the Zoom chat, does it get when we're streaming to YouTube? Does it go there as well?
No.
Okay.
On the other hand, if we put it in the chat for Zoom, it doesn't get preserved; it gets lost. So I like putting stuff into Zulip better. And even the stuff. Well, I don't know. I don't think the comments in the YouTube chat don't get preserved either, do they? Like if you're watching it later, I don't think you have access to those.
I don't think so.
No. So I would recommend that people just put stuff into Zulip when we're chatting. My reaction to the article was positive. I'm a little. I mean, the concerns we have about it, like, all fall within reasonable differences of, you know, how people their opinion might be. I think like a positive, not rebuttal, but follow-up blog post saying like, really, you know, this was a great article, and, you know, we appreciate the sentiment. Here are a few things that we'd like to clarify. Makes sense. Like, any sense that we're trying to get them to correct their article, to me, feels like overdoing it. And like we're getting maybe a little too defensive. I mean, it's their opinion, and I just didn't feel like it's that far off. Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
No, I think Jack wanted to.
Oh.
Yeah. Given that the conversation with the author went so well and like things are on such a positive note, I would even wonder whether we need a blog post on the backdrop blog that's at all anything like rebuttal or anything. Like, I feel like just sharing it through social media and leaving it at that might be plenty and might look less kind of like defensive or some, you know, things like that. We could it seems like we could correct anything that was inaccurate in there by putting out other information instead of like responding to that. So like if there's specific stuff like that we want to respond to in the article, but if there are specific things that's like, oh, this is a misconception we want to address, maybe writing a totally separate blog post that's like, hey, like not connected to her piece at all, but being like, hey, here's a thing we were writing about for no reason. Kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that. I think like the phrasing around it is really important, and having it not be like yes but have it just be like, here's a statement, I think could come off really well.
Sure. I'm not really worried about all of this. I would just encourage us not to get too defensive about little things, because every article is just one author's opinion. And I mean, if 3 or 4 of us were to write blog posts about backdrop, I think we'd each find something in the other one that we
Also
disagree
true.
with.
That's
Yeah.
true.
So, is there anything else going on in our world that we need to be addressing in social media, or could be?
There's something that I would like to bring up. It's been a while since we discussed, and we sort of like, it's a state of things, but I don't know if we need to approach people or whatever. I know that the submissions for DrupalCon ended on the 14th, and I didn't join the previous meeting to bring this up, but are DrupalCons still sort of like, I don't know, quote unquote, unfriendly to Backdrop? Yes, okay. All right, cool. That's all I wanted to bring up.
So, can we clarify that? Because did you nod your head, Jen, that unfriendly?
Yeah.
I think I would maybe agree to that, in that we're not likely to get a session, but I don't think they're so unfriendly that I wouldn't do a BOF or something.
That needs to be done carefully, because Backdrop is like in direct opposition to Drupal's goals, or
Right.
the Drupal Association's goals, and the Drupal Association is in charge of DrupalCon. And they let us do a couple of BOFs early on, and then later sort of had a bad reaction to it. So I think it could also be that every DrupalCon is different, and like the atmosphere is different, and it's worth trying again. But I think we shouldn't just assume it's okay to do a BOF. We should probably do some poking around the edges first before we put any content that says Backdrop in it on any website that is DrupalCon related.
Right. I think we've talked about this before, and I think we've also talked about like the more we could, like doing a BOF on alternatives, or options for Drupal 7, or migrations or something would be better than like why Backdrop's better than Drupal 8.
Yeah, and I think if that also was like a panel that included a long-term support vendor and like someone who does like WordPress migrations or something, it would also be taken much better than if it was just a Backdrop person or several.
True.
Yeah. Plus, also, if it was one of us doing the session, everyone would know that it was a front. It has to be someone else.
Maybe the person who wrote the Kalamuna article would be interested in working on it. I don't know.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, so what we have done at previous DrupalCons in face-to-face is have our own sort of side event, like a happy hour or things like that. And it's a little harder to imagine how to do that with DrupalCon now. So a virtual one. But, any idea? Okay. Anything else? Are there any other upcoming camps or virtual camps that we should be thinking about?
Stanford Web Camp is coming up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At least I got an email.
That sounds familiar.
I usually get notices for that, but I haven't seen them. I wonder if I dropped off a list somewhere.
Okay. Well, I think sort of interacting with any of these camps, especially ones that we know are friendly, via social media, is good. Like I have retweeted, Mid Camp and Florida Camp are ones that particularly we participated in and done sessions at, and so I try to retweet their stuff. any other online events that and one of the things we've talked about in the past is not being so Drupal specific about our events that we participate in. Like, are there any other non-Drupal camps, virtual events that we should be engaging with, or well, if people can think about that and get back to us.
There are some big ones, like the University of Illinois WebCon and stuff. And I've been sort of keeping an eye on them for the last few years, but the ticket prices for some of these events are hard to justify. And so it's just something that I think it will be great if we could encourage more people to get involved in these events, but I wouldn't feel comfortable like asking someone to pay that kind of a ticket price to go and talk about Backdrop.
Sure. I'm sure that there are the problem is, right, is the ones that fall into our radar screen are the really big ones, but we're maybe not on the list for the other small, camp-like ones that I'm sure are out there, right? And we might have to go out and look for them a little bit more. But I mean, there have been, I have seen like open source CMS event, nothing regular, but I have seen like small events like that in the past. There's like indie web stuff, which I think we might fit into if we look, and I doubt would be super expensive because that would be counter to their philosophy if we went out, but we're probably just not on their list right now, so we don't see what they're doing. So newsletters, let's talk about the newsletter. I'm jumping around a little bit within this things to do schedule, but for those who haven't participated, our newsletter has not been a real regular feature. We continually talk about making it more regular. We are on a 1 month streak of regular newsletters. But more importantly, we have a volunteer, although we have a volunteer who just had a baby, so we'll see how that works out. But we have a volunteer who's committed to trying to keep us on schedule right now. And so the goal is the end of the month or right at the beginning of the month. So that would be about a week. Well, I think the end of next week would be a time to start thinking about getting that newsletter out. So if people have content ideas for that, I want to try and keep some virtual user group meetings on the agenda. Anybody have anything else to recommend for the newsletter that we can pass on to Peter? What?
I did turn it off since it's rather expensive. When we use it once every 4 months, it makes sense, but to pay $25 a month.
Right.
So I don't know if you're talking to Peter about it, but I think that process of like verifying us might happen every time we turn it on.
Okay.
So if you are planning on sending another one, make sure that we don't run into the same problems we did last time.
So we're not paying right now. So what does turning it off and on involve?
So there's like a pause button that basically means you don't have to pay for it, but then you can't use it. And then before you want to use it again, you have to pay the monthly fee. And there's been a couple of months where like we use it once and then we pay for it for the second month, but then we don't use it. And so then I log in and turn it off so that we don't keep paying for it until we use it again. But that means when we do use it, we have to turn it back on. So you have to unpause it. So
maybe it's worth documenting the process of like if this happens again, what we need to do so that the person that's responsible is the task is less frustrating for them.
I'll go find that main newsletter ticket and see if I can add something.
Yeah. Or if there's a specific person that we need to contact, like contact emails or something like that. Although it's not good to expose people's emails. Yeah.
I don't think there is. I think it's just whoever's sending it needs to push that button in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
another thought too is trying to figure out our email sending problem in general. We need to figure out a better way to manage this. I think right now, like we have a pretty good temporary solution, but it's kind of an expensive temporary solution. It'll be good if we can figure out how to either send the emails ourselves using something like Civi CRM, an SMTP provider. Our current SMTP provider isn't working very well for us, considering a handful of messages are getting blocked in Russia and Ukraine, and that part of the world. But yeah, just in general, this is a problem space that could use some attention if we have people who are interested in sorting it out.
So just to be clear, you did pause it since the last newsletter, right?
I paused it
Or before that.
after we paid for the second month after the newsletter. So we paid for 1 month when we sent the newsletter, and then we paid for the second month when we haven't sent the newsletter, so I turned it off after that.
We just sent a newsletter 3 weeks ago, so how could that?
Yeah, and then it charged again like a week after that, so I turned it off.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't know what the cycle is, but
Okay. Okay, well.
So,
go
Alan,
ahead.
by the way, sorry, Alan Mills, which is a member of the community, owns a hosting company. I'm not sure if they do emails as well. It's worth reaching out to them, even for like know-how, and maybe he has more knowledge and experience on these things.
yeah, it seems like Phil's also really knowledgeable on email sending too. So yeah, anyone that can help us figure out a better alternative or more affordable one, or one that's less problematic. We have lots of areas that need.
And Phil's on the call, by the way.
Oh, good, he's here.
I don't want to dig into the details of like MX records and stuff right now, but
Yeah.
we do want to engage Phil with that. And yeah, actually, I'm thinking about Phil signing you up for a virtual user group to talk about things like SMTP and email issues related to your backdrop website.
Okay. Yeah, that'd probably be fine. I mean, I hate to think of myself as an expert, because there's anybody that's dealt with email understands there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes to email. But I mean, I can at least attest to what has worked for me. Yep. And, getting those pieces plugged in. So yeah, that'd be fine.
Well, based on your discussion in the forum or in the Zulip, you know more than I do. So anyways, anything else for the newsletter? Other things, suggestions for this next month? Well, Backdrop Live is going to be a big part of the next newsletter, because that'll be coming out like 2 weeks before it. So that should probably be our focus.
What is Backdrop Live?
Good question.
You've been away too long.
We did, Jack, in September, our first dedicated backdrop multi-day event. It was basically a virtual backdrop camp, or con, depending on how you look at it. We the quick summary is it was 48 hours. We did we tried to do sort of an international schedule, so we scheduled blocks of time, 3 hours on, 3 hours off, 3 hours on, with some gaps where there were just blocks that were really hours that nobody was going to participate. We skipped, but we did have stuff happening at like 3 a.m., although less for US time. We had a couple of European sessions that happened overnight. During most of the activity was during the day. We had about 60 to 65 people register, probably maximum of about 35 online at once, maybe up to 40 at one point. But I would say on average, we had 10 to 20 for most of that 24 hours or 48 hours.
We had sessions in multiple languages.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was pretty successful. It was a $20 suggested donation. We actually raised like $600, I think, or more, maybe.
I think it was almost $1,000.
$1,000 in donations. We used primarily Zoom and our existing Zoom accounts, and we had a website for it. So it went pretty well. And when we talked about what to do next, the thought was that we should try to do an event like it, but maybe not 48 hours each release cycle. So the goal is to really do 3 events a year. And our thought was the 2 of them would just be like 1-day events, and then maybe an annual 2-day event. So this is our second one. We have been meeting, a group of us have been meeting pretty much weekly for the last 3 or 4 weeks to promote it. I think I don't know, did we mention it in the last newsletter? Was there even there was a save the date kind of thing, I think, in the last newsletter. We didn't really have much more than that to share, but we've had it on the Backdrop events calendar for the last 2 or 3 months, just a date, basically saying watch for more information. So that's what it is. And We should probably talk a little bit more about it. Well, I don't know. Because we have dedicated meetings to that, I don't know, we need to go too deep, but does anybody have any more questions about it at this meeting?
Well,
ahead.
one thought that I mentioned this before, there was a person from the UK that was a project management manager, if I recall, of a sizable digital agency. And they were interested in an introduction, like to Backdrop, like because they heard of us, but that never happened due to technical problems. And I thought that I would reach out to them. So the question that comes, like this is the statement, the question is, I know that this is a 24-hour, so it's going to be a bit shorter, and this is Europe. So the general question is, if there's people like more than one person, but even one that are interested, instead of like doing the slots depending on our availability, should we reach out to them and see what works for them and sort of like accommodate, like base the slots on what the community expects worldwide, time-wise?
For those who didn't participate, one of the, I thought, kind of highlights of the last Backdrop Live was that we had been in touch with some members of the Classic Press community, and we invited them to come to Backdrop Live, and we did kind of a roundtable discussion with them, like across, like running a forking a major CMS, I think we called the session. And it was like a panel roundtable discussion with a couple members of the Classic Press community and ourselves. And then they also did a kind of another session, which was just an intro to Classic Press. And I don't know if what you're talking about, Gregory, is like that meeting of another community. Which group did you say this was?
It wasn't another community. It was a digital agency, like a shop that works with websites, and they're a Drupal shop, from what I understood. And they also had a big portion of their developers sort of like being frustrated with D8 and D9, and they were looking for alternatives. So it was that kind of situation. Or they had a mix of customers with sort of like, some of them had the budget to sort of like go to D8 and 9, but some of them not. So they were thinking about, retaining customers with a.
Say they're mostly in Europe?
They're in UK.
UK. In terms of our schedule, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily like change the 3 block hour times, but I certainly would work with them to schedule content when it's convenient for them. Yeah,
exactly. That's what.
To some extent, this again, for those who weren't there, this was largely an unconferencey type event where we just asked people to nominate topics. It was mostly discussion based. There were a few presentations. In this upcoming Backdrop Live, our goal is to focus all on discussions during the event, and that if people want to do presentations, they record them in advance and have them available for people to watch on their own time.
Yeah, so the main difference as well was that we were not recording the discussions in order to encourage participation, because some people may be hesitant if they're being recorded. But the counter to that was that there were no presentations or demos. If there were supposed to be a demo, it was supposed to be pre-recorded. And the link provided to it.
Okay. Anything else on Backdrop Live? No. Okay. I mean, any other blog posts or content stuff, suggestions? I think we should move on. We could talk more about that. I want to external mention the dashboard notifications should be a regular item on this agenda. Like, what do we need to get on the dashboard? And actually, we're in a good period right now where I'm not lacking content because we had a couple of virtual user groups. But is there anything beyond the virtual user groups and the obvious that we should get on our dashboard notifications?
Is that on the agenda? Like, it should be.
I know. I added it to today's agenda, and I should get it on the template so that it's every week.
Cool.
I think I'm not going to dwell on this because I think we have some ideas for this week, but please come to this meeting with ideas of what. Also, I mean, I'm just going to say, I love these dashboard notifications, but I've yet to get any feedback on them from anybody that actually uses them. So if you hear any anecdotes of people that like, oh, I saw that on the dashboard, please pass it on.
What are the dashboard notifications?
See? Point taken. Improved.
We introduced a dedicated block on the dashboard, which sort of like has a feed with specified links to things that are important, yes, to the community. And this is supposed to be, I think it's only 3, right, Tim? And it's supposed to be
Yes.
refreshed. Yeah.
What dashboard? Where? Like on the Backdrop CMS website?
On the actual product, on the dashboard that, yeah, there you go.
I'm doing a quick screen share. So
Oh. Oh.
Backdrop News. This has been what, about a year and a half now.
And does that need to be enabled on a site-by-site basis? Okay.
It's a module. If you have an older site that existed before the dashboard, you'll have to turn it on.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any
Cool,
news
thanks.
site will have this here by default, but old sites would have to turn it on. Anyways, so yeah, this has been there for like over a year. And has anybody heard anything from anybody that like says that people are noticing this? And is that a problem?
My clients sometimes comment on it. They're like, I haven't talked to them for a while, and they'll be like, I can see what's going on with Backdrop because of this block. So I think people are noticing it.
Good, because I've just gotten no anecdotal feedback.
I like it.
But I love the idea, and
I like it.
You know. Okay.
I feel like at some point we can make the dashboard more a part of the flow. I mean, I think all of us Drupal refugees got so used to using admin menu to do everything that we don't. I mean, the dashboard's kind of the equivalent of WordPress's, WP admin, and any WordPress user is in WP admin every single day, like without exception. And since that's not part of the flow, I don't know. I wonder if we might want to put some nudging in there to remind people that it exists, because it's, I forget it exists, and it was my idea.
I sometimes forget it exists, but then every time I log into a website, I land on it, and I'm like, oh yeah, dashboard's here. So I don't know.
And people coming from WordPress, if they're accustomed to that sort of like workflow, they will be using it in Backdrop. So yeah, that eventually will. I think it's useful. It's useful.
Okay. So moving
before we move on, Tim, sorry, I know that we have a lot of things on the agenda. Just wanted to bring this up, and maybe this is not the place to discuss, but the recent discussions with regards to PMC, I think they're sort of like outreachy. Maybe we should touch on them, like on actionable items, before we run out of time for this meeting.
Well, let's quickly talk about our last 15 minutes. I think we've covered a lot of the things on the rest of the agenda already. I would also like to talk about backdrop.org permissions, because that's something that's come up in the last week that seems outreachy because it has to do with, our properties and who can do what on, and it first came up actually so there's that. Let's talk about that. And the other thing to talk about is this PMC thing. Is there anything else for the rest of this agenda? The last 15 minutes.
And I would like also to shortly just bring up the survey thing, because
sure.
Yeah, but yeah, you facilitate the discussion, whichever topic you need to bring up first. Let's do it.
Okay, let's see if we can get all 3 of those. Do you want to start with the PMC thing, because you brought that up first, Gregory? And how does that fit into outreach?
So it seems that some members of the community that are quite frequent are not even aware of how things work, and we live in our own bubble. We've been participating in the community for many years, so certain things are obvious to us how they work, but not to others. So Alan Mills did make some suggestions which make sense, like providing more information, more transparency, things like that. With regards to decisions, with regards to how members are sort of like elected, but yeah, and information on individual members.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I don't know if there's any decisions to be made here at this meeting, although certainly communicating any decisions that are made would be part of this group. I think for me as a PMC member, the big takeaway from this meeting is just a reminder to pay more attention to PMC issues, which I haven't been. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
One actionable item is the leadership page may need some updating, some more information.
Okay.
I know that we have links to our profiles, and I don't know how we want to do that. Is that a view, or I think that's just yeah, it's markup. Yeah, I don't know.
There's now also a new issue in backdropcms.org that someone created for this. Who created? I think BW Panda, who's
Yes.
Peter, I think.
Yes.
So it seems like that's moving forward, which is good. Like with ideas of what to put on there and how to generate the content and stuff. So it feels like that's moving at a good clip.
Yeah. Sorry, I saw the link to it, but I didn't actually follow the discussions. Do they have actionable items like updating the website page with more information, things like that? Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, I can put that in the weekly meeting Zulip just so folks see it there too.
Cool.
Okay, excellent. I just shared my screen quickly and looked at the actual page if anybody needs a reminder. I think one of the things like, do we need more information about individuals is one thing that came up. Oh, yeah, I don't know. We can talk about that in GitHub. So I'm going to stop sharing again. We got some feedback. In a recent meeting, I just sort of kept sharing my screen and the agenda because I thought it better to look at that than our faces. But we got some feedback that from people watching the YouTube video that they had a hard time following who was talking if it was just the. So I'm gonna not be quite so liberal with my use of screen sharing anymore, unless I get other feedback. Okay, so we'll direct people's attention to the issue queue for the PMC issue. Give us your input there. What do we need to better communicate? And maybe we talk about that again at a future meeting.
A quick feedback from at least the PMC members that are present in this call, if they're comfortable with adding such short information about how they came to be PMC members or the topics that were touched on. So.
Well, I can say we had, and this ties into our blog post stuff, that we had intended to do like blog posts introducing the new PMC members that never happened. So that's just a case where our intentions were good, but follow through wasn't there.
Actually, that's a good idea. Linking to the respective blog articles which introduce the person as a PMC, sort of like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Jack?
Jack?
I mean, so on that thread, I posted an example. I think the standard thing for like boards, project management committees, like things like that is like, you kind of explain the purpose of the body and then like a bit, most of them actually, most organizations don't actually have anything about how the board is selected. It just kind of has like, here's why the board exists and here are board members in their bios. And the bios, the short bios are kind of meant to like, it's kind of, it demonstrates in and of itself why the folks are part of the body. So I think that if we're starting to look at like in like posting it, like justifying why everyone is on the, like demonstrating why folks are elected, things like that, that's a little kind of extra that's not normally done. But I think that everyone does seem fine with the like putting some kind of bio or more information and like links to profiles and stuff directly on a leadership page. So
even constituency or intention of the person, what they are passionate about within the community. Like, of course, we all are here to adhere that, like, to uphold the values and the principles that we have, but we also have personal drives, I should say, not intentions or things like that. But thanks, that was the feedback that I was looking for. I'm good, and it's recorded, so
good. The next thing was the permissions on like backdrop.org. So this came up in two different contexts, one of which is originally a user pointed out that anyone who logs into backdropcms.org can see all of the unpublished content. And I don't think that was an original decision. Gregory, I think you might have made that change at some point, because we kept running into this problem where somebody would post an article, a draft blog post, and say, go look at my draft and give me feedback, but then nobody had permission to see it. So I think the idea was, well, we don't really have anything secret that's unpublished, so let's just let anybody who's logged in view it. But I think a user has pointed out that that kind of means that, like anybody who first joins the organization, they come to the website, they create an account, they log in, and suddenly they see a bunch of unpublished content, and that's a little weird.
I fixed that. I made it so that unpublished content's only visible to editors and developers now.
But that brings us back to the original problem, which is now only editors can review undrafted blog posts.
No
So I think
feedback
there's a
from
better, I think there's a better solution than the other one, but we should think about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then this also came up because of what was the moderation. And I want to, well, this is a related but different question, which is, when I went in to look at this, I noticed that there were several unpublished showcase examples that people had submitted, and I realized that there isn't, I'm not doing a good job at watching for that, and we don't have any notification. Like, nobody is notified when somebody submits a showcase, and I have seen stuff like that sit for months without approval, and we need to solve that problem.
Yeah, agree.
So maybe we talk about that offline, or make sure we get an issue in the issue queue. I'd love to just have there be email notifications to some people, or a Zulip notification or something that says, hey, this has been published on the site. Somebody look at it. The same thing with unmoderated comments in the forum. People, if it's occasionally somebody's comment gets moderated in the forum, and we don't get notified, and then either it's like 2 months later, I see this moderated comment, or I've seen people like try to submit their thing 2 or 3 times, and usually what that means is they've had to rewrite it, like a 5 paragraphs submission, and that's painful.
That's different. So this, so if the system thinks that it's spam, it will keep it as unpublished, and they think that if they can't see it, they think that something went wrong and it wasn't saved, so they type it again. Not in the hope that if they type it more times, it will be approved. One thing that I would like to mention is that if we have email notifications, then we'll have another sort of like subsystem to maintain, like add emails of people that want to be notified. Whereas I find the way that we do it with the forum notifications in Zulip, all anyone has to do is just subscribe and they will receive notifications there. And that way we're also sort of like crowdsourcing moderation.
Sure. Right. My reaction always to that is that I know how to enable a module and turn it on to send email notifications. I don't know how to set up Zulip notifications. I could learn it, but so unless we have, we got to have somebody who can do that to make that.
So who's done the notifications for Zulip for our forum side?
Probably Peter, because
Peter.
I didn't.
Yeah, he's passionate about automating things, so yeah. Reach out to him.
Didn't Tim, wasn't it Daniel Radcliffe who did some work?
David Radcliffe did a bunch, not Daniel. He was in Harry Potter. David Radcliffe. David Radcliffe did help with the Zulip, but I don't think he did that. Although he might have. It's possible.
Well, he might have the skills that are needed for it, even if.
He definitely has the skills. He's a friend of mine, and the question is if I can persuade him and twist his arm to do it. But he's definitely a candidate. Yeah, he could do that. Okay. Well, we're almost at the time. There was one other. Remind me what the last issue was that came up. There were 3 things: the PMC, this
survey,
the survey.
Just the quick thing was that at some point I expressed the opinion that I think that the survey should be ongoing instead of having a deadline.
Right.
Can have a sort of like a virtual deadline for specific events, like decide what's going to go in next, or what will drive the next feature release. but it should be ongoing, and people can change their minds, so we can use it as a heartbeat or whatever.
We have a Zulip or a GitHub issue to talk about this. I think we should talk about this in an outreach meeting, though, but I think today's not the one because I have opinions about this and they're not the same as yours. Which means,
we only have 2 minutes. Fair enough.
Which means that we're not going to resolve this in 2 minutes. So should we table that for a future meeting to come back
Yes,
to?
please. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think a legitimate question right now that there might be a quick answer to is there anything else we could do with the past survey in terms of outreach? Like, I think maybe a blog post about what we did and just sort of summarizing the results. That might be one thing. Does anybody have any other ideas?
What was it? Can we put it in the dashboard?
We did. Well, we certainly could put the blog post, a link to the blog post into the dashboard, which I think would be a good idea. We did have a dashboard notification about that inviting people to participate. But that's no longer good. So, in fact, I need to take that down because it's still in the dashboard. Okay. Okay. Well, the follow up on the survey is something that I think we also need to talk about in the dev meeting in terms of like the actual results, but we should come back to that later. So I think, is there anything else in this meeting? Anything we didn't cover? Okay. Let's wrap up this meeting and get ready for the dev meeting, which is supposed to be starting now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.